I lost my wife after returning from the battlefield. Hey there today. I want to tell you a story about my life, about the woman I loved more than myself, and about how I lost her little by little right there in our own home. This story isn't a thriller, there's no obvious enemy, but it haunts me every night, gnawing at me more than any other tragedy. How are you doing? Is work going well these days? I hope you're having a better day than I had all those years ago. I want to tell you, because maybe somewhere out there are other men in my position watching their loved ones slowly sink without realizing it. Or worse, realizing it and doing nothing. And even more painfully, when your own indifference leads to a bitter separation without a word of goodbye. I want my story, however painful, to be a warning to someone. It all started the day I returned but left a part of my soul behind on that harsh battlefield. The international airport buzzed like a broken beehive. Announcements echoed, luggage wheels clattered, children cried, and above all, there was the thunderous cheering and applause from hundreds of loved ones waiting for their soldiers to return. The American flag hung high, fluttering in the chilly autumn breeze, a reminder of national pride, of sacrifice and courage. I was Sergeant Ken Miller, one of those soldiers just stepping off a long transcontinental flight, returning after 2 years stationed in Afghanistan. But all those sounds and images seemed to not reach me. I walked like a somnambulist, each step heavy on the shiny floor. I was only looking for one thing: a gaze. Her gaze, Alyssa's. My wife. And when I found her standing amidst the crowd, her eyes red but radiant with a smile, I felt such a strong pull that I wanted to collapse right there. She ran to me, her glossy brown hair flying in the wind, her familiar light blue dress hugging her slender frame. She hugged me tightly, her arms wrapped around me as if afraid I would vanish again. Her scent, the gentle lavender and the old paper smell from the letters she sent, flooded my senses, awakening feelings I thought had long been dormant. I could feel every intense beat of her heart through my thick uniform. But I didn't cry. Not a single tear. I didn't tremble either, though my whole body was taut as a guitar string. I just stood there motionless like a cold stone statue. I don't know why. Perhaps a part of my soul was still stuck somewhere in that distant white sand, where gunfire still echoed, where screams still resonated in my head. I had returned physically, but I was no longer the Ken she knew. Ken had gone missing somewhere on the battlefield. We walked through the crowd receiving congratulations and pats on the back, but I couldn't feel anything. I just wanted to go home to Alyssa, to the peace I had craved for 2 years. But then as I stepped into her familiar car, as I saw Alyssa's radiant face, a strange feeling washed over me. Our home, I had imagined it warm, filled with laughter, but now it was just an empty space where I felt lost and didn't belong. I had once sworn to protect these values, but now I myself couldn't find them. In the first few days, Alyssa tried her best to make everything normal again. She cooked my favorite dishes, played the music I used to listen to. She asked what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I tried to respond, tried to pretend that everything was fine, that I was still the old Ken. But every time she smiled or tried to touch me, a sense of distance would rise. I felt like I was playing a role, the role of a man who had returned peacefully, while in reality inside me was a chaotic battlefield. I spoke much less. My stories were always curt or evasive. I didn't want to talk about what I had been through. I was afraid of scaring her. Afraid of dragging her into the darkness that was consuming me. I wanted to protect her from those horrific memories. But my concealment, my silence was creating a chasm between us that could not be filled. I didn't realize that this was the first secret I kept. I had brought the war home, not in my luggage, but in my soul. And that secret was more terrifying than any stray bullet. For the first 3 months after returning home, sleep became torture. I couldn't sleep through a single night. Every time I closed my eyes, the battlefield reappeared. I dreamt of earth-shattering explosions, blinding smoke and dust obscuring my vision. I saw comrades screaming in despair, their shouts tearing through the cold night. I saw blood, so much blood staining my hands, clinging to my skin, unable to be washed away. The cold metallic feel of the gun, the acrid smell of gunpowder, and the whistling of bullets, all were chillingly real. I often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, breathing heavily like a drowning man in his own bed. These nightmares often came with spasms, involuntary movements. Alyssa, lying next to me, was often woken by my groans, my lost screams. She would gently touch my shoulder, trying to comfort me, trying to pull me out of the nightmare, but I would reflexively push her away, harder than I ever wanted to, harder than I thought I could. The first time I did that, I saw true fear in her eyes, a look that was both hurt and panicked. She kept saying, "It's okay, honey, it's just a nightmare," but her eyes told a different story. A story of worry, of pain and helplessness as she watched the man she loved slowly turn into a stranger. I started avoiding sleep. I was afraid of what I would see, what I would have to go through when I closed my eyes. The more I feared, the more I avoided. I tried every way to stay awake. At night, I would often sneak out to the garage drinking beer alone. Empty beer cans piled up until a numbness spread throughout my body, helping me temporarily forget those haunting images. I thought if I don't sleep, I won't have to face them. I never told her about what I had been through, what I had seen on the battlefield. I was afraid of scaring her, afraid of dragging her into the darkness that was consuming me. I wanted to protect her from those horrific memories. I wanted to keep her in her own peaceful world. But my concealment, my silence was creating an invisible wall, a chasm that could not be filled between us. I didn't realize that this was the first secret I kept. I had brought the war home, not in my luggage, but in my soul. And that secret was more terrifying than any stray bullet because it was slowly destroying what I once cherished most. I tried to make everything normal again. I went back to work, tried to focus on my tasks. But everything felt meaningless. The city noise, the trivial conversations of colleagues all irritated me. I was often grumpy, easily angered sometimes over small things. Alyssa tried to ask questions, tried to talk, but I always evaded. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain what was happening inside me. I felt like I was being controlled by something invisible, pulling me into a deep hole where light couldn't reach. My coldness, my unusual reactions hurt Alyssa. I saw her eyes grow sadder each day. She tried to hold on, tried to find the old Ken, but I pushed her further and further away. Little did I know my silence was killing this marriage little by little. Little did I know the protection I was trying to create was a form of rejection, a form of betrayal not physically, but with my very soul. One night when I screamed in my dream again, the scream seemed louder, more real. I jolted awake, my breath still ragged. Beside me, Alyssa was sobbing uncontrollably. Her crying was no longer soft whimpers, but real choked sobs tearing through the silence of the room and tearing through my heart too, though I didn't show it. She sat up, leaning against the headboard, her eyes filled with tears and deep pain, looking straight at me. "I don't know what to do anymore, Ken," she said, her voice choked and trembling. "You don't talk to me. You don't laugh anymore. You don't hug me like before. I've tried so hard. I've read books, I've asked friends, I've researched everything, but I feel like I'm living with a shadow of you. A strange shadow, someone I no longer recognize." My heart tightened. I wanted to tell her that I didn't know who I was anymore either. I wanted to tell her that I was also lost within myself in the maze of horrific memories. I wanted to scream that I was also in pain, that I was also scared, that I also wanted to find the old Ken. But I couldn't speak. My throat felt constricted. My lips were stiff. I just stayed silent. That silence, I thought it was the only weapon to protect myself, to prevent those horrific memories from spilling out, to keep her from being even more afraid. But in reality, it was a double-edged sword slowly cutting the last connection between us. I chose silence, and that silence was more painful than 1,000 lies. From that night on, we gradually stopped communicating. The distance between us was no longer just my nightmares, but a thick wall of silence and unnamed emotions. Cold dinners without a word, only the clinking of cutlery and averted gazes. Weekends passed with no plans, no laughter, just the presence of two lonely people in the same space. Gentle touches, warm hand-holding, intimate gestures that had once been the breath of our love, now gradually thinned out, then disappeared completely. Every time Alyssa summoned the courage, trying to break the silence with the words, "Ken, we need to talk," I would feel a surge of panic. I couldn't face it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain. So I would just leave the house, get in the car, and drive aimlessly. I was running from her, running from myself, running from the truth I didn't dare to face. I drove through familiar streets, past brightly lit houses, families gathered together. I looked at them and felt like an outsider, a homeless person in my own life. I tried to find a reason not to go home, not to face Alyssa's pained eyes. I spent more time out, working overtime at the office even though there were no truly urgent projects, going out for beers with old friends but not talking much. I simply tried to fill the time, fill the void in my heart, so I wouldn't have to face what was waiting for me at home. I deluded myself into thinking I was de-stressing, that I was finding myself again. But in reality, I was running and I was pushing the woman I loved most away. Alyssa tried to hold on, tried to find the old Ken, the warm, funny, and always understanding man. She tried everything, cooking my favorite dishes, buying movies I wanted to watch, suggesting outings. But every one of her efforts was met with my wall of silence. I had become numb to all emotions. I no longer felt her love, no longer felt her pain. I was too immersed in my own fear and self-pity. Little did I know my silence, my lack of understanding was killing this marriage, little by little, more painfully than any physical wound. Little did I know the protection I was trying to create was a form of rejection, a form of betrayal. Not physically, but with my very soul by no longer being there for her. This was the second secret I kept. My indifference had become a weapon of destruction, even more terrifying than any weapon I had ever held on the battlefield. Sometimes my irritability even turned into uncontrollable actions. I never actively hit her, never raised my hand to harm her. But there were times when Alyssa tried to touch me, to pull me out of the haze of memories. I would flinch violently, shoving her hand away harder than I intended. Once she tried to hug me when I was half awake in a nightmare, and I reacted instinctively by pushing her so hard she lost her balance, almost falling to the floor. I didn't mean to. In that moment, I just saw a sudden figure lunging at me, and I reacted as if I were on the battlefield. I saw her eyes filled with fear mixed with profound disappointment. She didn't yell, just quietly stood up, retreating into herself. Those involuntary actions stemming from a deep fear within me became new cuts, invisible but infinitely more painful, into Alyssa's fragile heart. Another time, when I was drinking beer in the garage, Alyssa came down trying to talk. I was immersed in my own discomfort, and when she touched my arm, I reacted violently by slamming the beer can I was holding onto the ground. The can shattered, beer spilled everywhere on the floor, and Alyssa flinched, backing away. She said nothing, just looked at me with horror in her eyes, as if looking at a stranger. I saw that fear. I saw her shoulders tremble, but I couldn't control myself. A baseless rage erupted, making me want to destroy everything around me. I yelled senselessly words I don't remember, just know they were filled with frustration and despair. Alyssa just quietly turned away, walked upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark garage amidst the spilled beer and the engulfing regret. Those actions, though unintentional, truly terrified Alyssa. She no longer dared to come near me. Touches, intimate gestures completely disappeared. We lived like two strangers under the same roof. I had created a cage for myself, and I had trapped Alyssa inside it too. I had not only emotionally hurt her, but I had also instilled in her a real fear of my uncontrollability. This was the third secret, a darker secret. I had allowed my pain to turn into an invisible violence, pushing Alyssa to the brink of endurance. I came home one gloomy Tuesday afternoon. The rain was pouring down, raindrops hitting the car windows, creating a sad sound like the silent weeping of the earth. My shirt was soaked, my shoes covered in mud from my aimless walking on the streets. I walked into the house. It was as it always was, but a strange cold silence enveloped the space. No soft music, no familiar smell of food, no Alyssa. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. A chilling sense of unease crept in. She was usually home by this time. I walked into the kitchen, looking around. Everything was strangely tidy. Dishes washed, items neatly arranged. It seemed she had cleaned very thoroughly before leaving. A feeling of fear rose, but I tried to calm myself. Maybe she went shopping or visited friends. Then I saw it. On the dining table under the dim light was a small white note neatly placed under a cold coffee cup, a handwritten note in a thick envelope. I tremblingly picked up the note. My hands kept shaking uncontrollably, so much so that I had to hold it tightly with my other hand. Just a few simple lines, but they were like arrows piercing straight into my heart, leaving me paralyzed. I tried, Ken. I truly tried. I tried every day, every hour to understand you, to pull you out of that place, but I can't do this alone anymore. I can't live with a shadow of the man I love. I love you, Ken. My love for you never changed, but I also need to be loved back the way I deserve. I need a husband by my side, not someone who exists physically, but whose soul has drifted away. I'm sorry. I have to go. I can't take it anymore. You'll find the divorce petition in this envelope. I've already signed it. The house was eerily silent. No music, no familiar smell of food, no Alyssa. She was gone. And this time I knew she had truly left. I didn't cry, not a single tear fell, but something inside me completely shattered. It wasn't a noisy breakdown, not a scream or physical pain, but a profound, deep break, a shattering from deep within, invisible to the naked eye, but it destroyed me. The feeling of emptiness overwhelmed me, more intense than any pain I had ever known. A giant black hole devoured all my emotions, all my reason. I had truly lost her, and I knew I had pushed her away with my own hands. I opened the envelope. Inside was the completed divorce petition with Alyssa's signature neatly at the bottom of the page. The familiar name, the slender strokes now carried the weight of 1,000 tons of stone pressing on my chest. Not a single tear fell, but something inside me completely shattered. It wasn't a noisy breakdown, not a scream or physical pain, but a profound, deep break, a shattering from deep within, invisible to the naked eye, but it destroyed me. The feeling of emptiness overwhelmed me, more intense than any pain I had ever known. A giant black hole devoured all my emotions, all my reason. I had truly lost her, and I knew I had pushed her away with my own hands. I slumped to the cold floor, the crumpled note in my hand. I held my head, trying to suppress the groan struggling to escape my throat. I looked around the empty room and memories flooded back. Romantic dinners by candlelight, evenings curled up on the sofa watching movies, conversations that lasted all night, all now just fragments, painful recollections in a silent house. I was too immersed in my own pain, too afraid to face what I had been through, that I ignored every sign, every silent plea from Alyssa. I chose to close the door to the outside world, and unintentionally, I also closed the door to the woman who loved me most. I had built an invisible wall between us, and now she could no longer cross it. I tried to reassure myself that she would come back, that she just needed a little space, a little time to think. But deep down I knew this was the cruelest truth. I had lost her, and my indifference, my silence was the cause. I picked up the pen, my hand still trembling. I looked at Alyssa's signature, then at the empty space for my own. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Was there still a chance? Could I change? But then the image of Alyssa's frightened eyes when I pushed her hand away, the sound of the shattered beer can, my shouts, all those images were vivid. I couldn't make her suffer anymore. This was the only way for her to truly be free, and for me to finally face who I really was. Taking a deep breath, I put the pen down and signed the divorce petition. Each stroke of the pen was like a knife cutting the last bond between us. The faint scratch of the pen on paper echoed like thunder in the empty house. Everything was officially over. I had personally ended this marriage so Alyssa could find peace, and so I finally could confront the remnants of war within my own soul. 2 weeks after Alyssa left and I signed the divorce petition, I still lived in an empty house engulfed in a terrifying silence. Each day felt like a century. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind was constantly tormented by the question, where is Alyssa now? Is she okay? What have I done? That torment was even more terrifying than any pain I had ever known. I felt like I was slowly sinking into a mire of regret and despair. Finally unable to bear it any longer, and partly because of the advice of an old friend, a veteran who had also experienced similar things, I decided to see a psychologist. Not to try to save the broken marriage because I knew it was too late, but to understand what I had lost and who I had become. I needed to find the cause of my emptiness, my coldness, my nightmares and baseless irritability, and also the uncontrolled violent reactions I had inflicted on Alyssa. I found the office of a psychologist named Dr. Evans, an older man with understanding eyes. The therapy room was cozy with soft lighting and landscape paintings on the walls, creating a strangely peaceful atmosphere. In the first sessions, I poured out all the burdens, the horrific images, and the hardened emotions I had suppressed for so long. I talked about the sleepless nights, about the nightmares as real as if I were still on the battlefield. I talked about the baseless rages, about the feeling of being detached from everything around me, including Alyssa. I talked about how I had pushed her away, about my silence, about the note on the table, and about the divorce petition I had signed. And then I talked about the moments I lost control, the times I unconsciously shoved Alyssa's hand away or smashed things when anger flared. I recounted it with extreme shame, but I knew I needed to face them. Dr. Evans listened patiently, without interrupting, without judging. He just nodded gently, sometimes jotting down a few lines in his notebook. After a few therapy sessions, he looked at me, his eyes full of compassion, and gave me the diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. "Ken," he said, his voice calm but clear, "what you're experiencing isn't a sign of weakness or that you're crazy. It's a completely normal reaction of your body and mind to the abnormal and extremely stressful events you've been through. All the nightmares, the baseless rages, the feeling of detachment, the emotional numbness, and also those exaggerated, uncontrolled reactions, they are all symptoms of PTSD. You're wounded, Ken. It's just that your wounds don't bleed externally, can't be seen with the naked eye, but they're gnawing at you from deep within." Every word from Dr. Evans was like a splash of cold water to my face, but also a glimmer of light. I wasn't crazy, I was sick. An invisible but real illness. That truth made me both relieved and pained. Relieved because I wasn't insane, pained because I had let this illness destroy my life, destroy my love for Alyssa. Dr. Evans further explained PTSD, how it affects the brain and emotions, and how soldiers often tend to hide their pain, afraid of being seen as weak. He talked about the importance of confronting trauma, naming the pain, and seeking help from those around you. "Many soldiers who return face this problem, Ken," Dr. Evans said. "They isolate themselves, they refuse to share, they push their loved ones away. It's a self-defense mechanism, but it causes terrible consequences for their relationships and for themselves. You're Alyssa. She also went through her own battle. She fought to keep you, to understand you, to pull you out of the darkness, but she wasn't strong enough alone. She also needed you to share, needed you to allow yourself to be vulnerable, needed you to admit that you were hurting. And most importantly, she needed to feel safe with you, something you unintentionally took away. I sat there listening to every word and felt overwhelming regret. I had missed hundreds, thousands of opportunities to understand and be there for Alyssa. I was too preoccupied with feeling sorry for myself, with hiding my pain, that I unintentionally pushed the woman I loved most away. I had failed in my role as a husband, a partner. I didn't choose to stay. I chose to leave within my own home, building an invisible wall between us, and then pushed her to the deepest abyss of despair until she was forced to free herself with a divorce petition. Dr. Evans didn't blame me. He just said, "No one is perfect. Ken, what matters is that you've realized that you've dared to face the truth, however late. This is the first step towards healing. But remember, some wounds, no matter how hard you try, will never heal completely. And some losses can never be compensated for." Those words of his were like a slow knife cutting into my heart, but also a release. I started writing a journal, recording every memory, every detail of the battlefield, every chaotic emotion within me, recounting every time I retreated when Alyssa tried to get close. I even documented the times I unconsciously scared her, my violent reactions, and the feeling of signing the divorce petition. Every line I wrote was like a slow knife cutting into my emotional wound, but also a necessary stitch, helping me mend the broken pieces of myself. I learned to name my pain. I learned to face the demon inside me. This was the final secret revealed. It wasn't that Alyssa left because she stopped loving me, but because I didn't give her the chance to fight alongside me. I pushed her away and then sought release in isolation. That was the biggest betrayal, and the truth is, I let my fear turn into actions that made Alyssa no longer feel safe with me, to the point where she was forced to find a way to free herself. The therapy sessions with Dr. Evans became my lifeline. I learned to identify the triggers for my panic attacks: a sudden car horn, an unexpected burning smell, or even just a fleeting dream. I learned breathing techniques, how to calm my mind when horrific memories rushed in. More importantly, I learned to speak out. For the first time in my life, I truly talked about what I had seen, what I had done, and what I had lost. Tears fell, bitter tears of regret and long-suppressed pain. I cried not out of self-pity, but out of sorrow for the old Ken and for my lost love with Alyssa. I also joined a veteran support group. There I met people like me, people with invisible scars. We shared our stories, listened to each other, and found empathy that no one else could understand. Knowing I wasn't alone in this battle gave me strength. We weren't just veterans. We were survivors trying to find meaning in our lives after the brutality of war. As time passed, I felt myself slowly returning to who I was, but a different version, more mature and more pained. I realized that healing is a long journey, not a destination. I still have bad days, moments when darkness tries to consume me. But now I have the tools, I have the support, and most importantly, I have the will to fight. I fight not just for myself, but for Alyssa, for what she had to go through because of me. I fight so that one day I can become the man she deserved, whether she comes back or not. I also started volunteering at another veteran support center. I tell my story to newly returned soldiers, those who are walking the path I once did. I hope that by sharing my mistakes and my pain, I can help them avoid similar consequences. I want them to know that no one has to suffer alone. I want them to know that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Alyssa never came back. We only text occasionally, short, empty lines. I don't blame her. I know that love, no matter how strong, cannot replace healing, understanding, and above all, safety. She left not because she stopped loving me, but because she was no longer loved the way she deserved, and no longer felt safe with me. I had pushed her to face the fear I had instilled in her all alone. She chose to leave. Not because she stopped loving me, but because she was no longer loved the way she deserved, and more importantly, she no longer felt safe with me. She needed a husband by her side, a partner to overcome the storm with her. But I was too immersed in my own pain, too afraid to face it, that I unintentionally pushed the woman I loved most away to a point of no return. I had left her alone to face the fear that I myself had instilled. The moment I signed the divorce petition still haunts me. It was the hardest decision, but also the last protective act I could do for her. I signed because I loved her enough to let her go, to let her find peace. Every time I reread the note, she left her words echo in my head: "I can't do this alone." She fought alone, lonely in that battle, not only against my emotional distance, but also against the fear from my uncontrolled reactions. And that was more painful than any war wound. That is the greatest regret of my life. I let her bear everything until she was exhausted. I let her choose between love and her own survival. And she chose survival. I often wonder what would have happened if I had been brave enough to voice my pain earlier, to seek help, to control my anger. Perhaps things would have been different, but those what-ifs only dig deeper into the pain. I am still on my healing journey. I am learning to forgive myself, to accept the invisible scars. I don't know if there will be a second chance, but I believe that if there is, I will be a different man. A man who has learned the bitter lesson about courage, understanding, and never leaving the one you love to fight alone, never letting fear control your actions. If you're listening to this story, whether you're a veteran or anyone enduring an invisible pain, please don't try to bear it alone. Post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD isn't a sign of weakness. It's a wound that needs healing. Be brave enough to name your pain. Seek help from a professional, from people you trust. Open up your heart. Don't wait until the person you love most walks out the door. Don't wait until you lose everything you hold precious. Life is short and love is fragile. Don't let my story become yours. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to my painful and regretful story. I know this isn't a beautiful fairy tale, but a tragedy of indifference and wrong choices. I truly hope that from my mistakes, from the pain I've endured, you can take away something valuable for yourselves. If you found this story meaningful, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Share your thoughts or your own story if you've experienced something similar, or if you have loved ones dealing with issues like PTSD. And please don't forget to share this video with anyone you think needs to hear it. Perhaps someone out there desperately needs this warning, needs a jolt to recognize the value of true understanding and genuine love before it's too late, before they lose the chance to save a life, a family. Finally, if you want to support this channel and hear more emotional, meaningful stories and other life lessons, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a huge motivation for me to continue sharing authentic stories from life stories that can touch hearts and change lives. Thank you all very much.